I'm David Charvet with Charvet Classic Cars. We're here in the showroom today with a 1939 Packard 120, or as it was known in 1939, the Packard 8. I'll tell you a little bit about that after you take a closer look at the car. The Packard 120 was introduced in 1935, and it really was the car that saved the Packard Motor Car Company. Unlike other luxury car manufacturers like Pierce Arrow and Stutz and Marmon, who went out of business completely by 1937, Packard knew in the middle of the Depression that something had to be done or they would not survive. So they came up with a lower priced, high quality car that could sell at a medium price, kind of in line with an Oldsmobile or a Pontiac in that price class, around $1,000. Now that was unheard of with Packard before that, and during that time, most Packards were selling in the $3,000 to $4,000 and up range. So for someone to be able to buy a Packard at 1/3 the price that you would formerly have paid, that was a big deal. And when the cars were introduced in 1935, they were a sensation. Now, the nomenclature of the car changed over the years, and by the time this car was made in 1939, they were referring to this as the Packard 8, not the 120, but the 8. And how that came about really was in 1936, Packard realized that they were making 3 8-cylinder engines, and there was really no reason for that. They were making the 120, which was a 282 cubic inch, 120 horsepower engine. They were also making this, what they called the Standard 8, which was 320 cubic inches and 130 horsepower. And then also the big one was the 384 cubic inch Super 8, or Custom 8, earlier on, and that had 150 horsepower. Well, again, there was really no reason for them to make 3 different 8-cylinder engines, so at the end of 1936, Packard got rid of the big Super 8, the 384 cubic inch engine, which actually dated back to the 1920s in design, and they had come up with better ways to make a lighter engine that would create more power anyway. So the big Super 8 went away, and with a little bit of hocus pocus on the part of the Packard advertising department, in 1937, The Super 8 was actually what had formerly been the Standard 8, the 320 cubic inch, 130 horsepower engine, which they used from 1937 up until 1939 to power the Super 8 cars. Now this, being a 120, to avoid confusion and to kind of raise the bar a little bit, they named this in 1938 the Packard 8, 38 and 39. So it's still a 120, and it's still a great car, but it's what they called again at the time the Packard 8. So again, it's all nomenclature, which doesn't affect the quality of the car whatsoever. These are wonderful cars. They are really wonderful cars. The first Packard I owned was a 1940 120, very similar to this. And I drove that car 30,000 miles in 3 years, so I drove it practically every day. And I can tell you the 120s are absolutely reliable. They are wonderful driving cars. They have a lot of modern features that when they were introduced in 1935 later went on to be used on the larger Packards, such as independent front suspension, 16-inch disc wheels, overdrive, which came in this year in 1939. There were a lot of changes that again were developed on these cars that went into the bigger cars. So because of that, these cars were really, really popular. And in terms of Packard, at least, they were really popular. They didn't sell like a Chevrolet or a Ford, but if you wanted a Packard, most of them that were sold around this time were 120s. This car was collector-owned for many, many years, and it was purchased in the 1960s by the most recent owner, and he lavished a restoration on the car, exterior restoration, I will say, because as you saw, the interior in this car is really very, very original. It has seat covers over the original seats. The upholstery is there. I have not removed the seat covers, but I'm sure they were put on there for a reason. So likely the upholstery underneath would need to be replaced if you're going to remove the seat covers. And the seat covers have some wear too, but it does not affect the car overall. There is, by the way, in the trunk a roll of gray leather, which was purchased by the most recent owner, and I think his plan was to reupholster the car, and that will come with the car when you buy it. Anyway, the design is classic Packard, and something that was actually a holdover from the senior cars that later went away on the 120s is you'll notice the shutters on the front of the car. It has the thermostatic shutters, which operate when the engine gets warm, the shutters open up. And again, that was a high-level piece of engineering that you usually only found on the most expensive Packards or the more expensive Packards. So they still use them up until 39. By 1940, that went away, and the 120 simply had a straight open louver with an internal thermostat in the engine. So this is the last of that really classic Packard look. Outboard headlights, the Cormorant hood ornament, dual side mounts, which is unusual on a 120. You usually don't see these because people wanted to save money. They were an adder to get the dual side mounts. And they're not ungangly on this car. This is a 127-inch wheelbase, and these sit nicely in line just with the hood. And that's really good because you see some cars where the side mounts are on a shorter wheelbase and they stick up here and they really disrupt the lines of the car. This is a very elegant car. This is also the end of the era for running boards and for trunk racks. They were gone at the end of 1940 on Packards. And so this is really classic Packard styling wrapped around a pretty modern drivetrain in the day. This car is 85 years old now, and certainly you can take it out and it goes. And with the overdrive, this is the first year overdrive again for Packard, also first year for column shift. It performs. It'll go down the highway easily, 60 miles an hour, and you can keep up with modern traffic, which is important if you're out touring. And this car was used for touring, although really the condition is wonderful, and you don't see really any signs that this car was beat up or chipped up or abused. It really presents nicely. The color is Balfour green, and it's a little slight metallic in it, which I think is correct on this car, and it certainly looks great on this car. Everything else, electric windshield wipers, not vacuum operated, so they go at any speed. Again, lots of little things in this car that really make it beautiful to look at and certainly a pleasure to drive. So let's go for a drive.
Well, it's a perfect day for a drive in this car. It's nice and warm outside, but if you open up your
Little window vents here. Open up your cowl vent. You have flow-through ventilation, and it works great. This car runs remarkably well, as you will see. The oil pressure is strong. It never gets hot on a day like today, and it just really goes right down the road. It starts easily. Turn the key, push the button, and that's it. Again, first year for column shift on Packard. Put it into first, release your brake, and away we go. It shifts very easily. And very good brakes. I mentioned that this car has overdrive, and it comes in great on the highway. You can get it 23 miles an hour roughly. If your overdrive knob is pushed in, you simply lift up on the gas and it shifts into fourth gear. And you're great then at freeway speeds. Now the mileage on this car shows just under 41,000 miles. However, the odometer is not working. But looking at the condition of the car overall, particularly the rubber floor mat up front, there's no appreciable wear and no holes at the foot area where your foot would be on the accelerator pedal. So that tends to tell me that that mileage is probably pretty close to being accurate. This car really is a pleasure to drive anywhere. And again, having owned one and driven about 30,000 miles in 3 years, I can tell you they're very comfortable. So if you have any questions about this Packard or any of the other cars we represent, give me a call at 503-309-7729 or find us online at charvetclassiccars.com. I'm David Charvet. Thanks for watching.